Drama unfolded on the House floor on Thursday over the push for D.C. statehood. House Democrats voted to make portions of Washington, D.C. the 51st U.S. state. It would give the district's 700,000 residents something they've never had, a voting member of Congress and representation in the U.S. Senate. But Republican opposition ensures the proposal, probably dead on arrival in the Senate, perhaps because two senators elected from D.C. would almost surely be Democrats. The House vote devolved into heated arguments after Democratic Congressman Mondaire Jones condemned objections to D.C. statehood as racist. He took aim in particular at two remarks, one from Republican Senator Tom Cotton, who said that granting statehood would prevent D.C. from becoming a, quote, well-rounded working-class state, and another from Congressman Jody Hice, who griped that the district doesn't have a number of factors, including landfills.
Mr. Speaker, I have had enough of my colleagues' racist insinuations that somehow the people of Washington, D.C. are incapable or even unworthy of our democracy. One Senate Republican said that D.C. wouldn't be a, quote, well-rounded working-class state. I had no idea there were so many syllables in the word white. One of my House Republican colleagues said that D.C. shouldn't be a state because the district doesn't have a landfill. My goodness, with all the racist trash my colleagues have brought to this debate, I can see why they're worried about having a place to put it. The truth is, there is no good faith argument for disenfranchising over 700,000 people, Mr. Speaker, most of whom are people of color.
GOP House members, as you can hear, erupted in opposition, asked for Congressman Jones to agree to have his remarks stricken from the congressional record. He consented, but said that the GOP's objections are all about fear. Congressman Mondaire Jones joins me now. Congressman, thank you for being here. Is it necessarily racist to oppose D.C. statehood?
In the case of the debate today, it is. Because when you listen to the explanation set forth by my Republican colleagues, you can see quite clearly that they are not offered in good faith. And the fact is, and something that I'm hoping people increasingly become aware of, is that if you uphold systems of white supremacy, even if you do not consider yourself to be racist, you are engaging in racist activity. There are 700,000 people in the District of Columbia, more than in the state of Wyoming and Vermont. And so the idea that we would disenfranchise those people, that we would tax them without representation, something we fought in the Revolutionary War over, by the way, is unconscionable. And when you compare the states that we have enfranchised with the District of Columbia and the demographics there, overwhelmingly people of color, it is quite a sinister thing.
Well, I think I heard you say that to oppose it today is necessarily racist, and you probably know where I'm going with this. When the first vote was taken on D.C. statehood in 1993, a majority of Democrats joined Republicans in opposing it. Were they racist?
Right is right and wrong is wrong. And so, as I mentioned earlier, people can come to a place of enlightenment, as many people who voted in 1993 have now come to today, saying, you know what, that was the wrong thing to do. To uphold a system that disenfranchises 700,000 plus people is voter suppression on its face. And it is something that we need to be rectifying today, especially given what's happening throughout the country. In 43 different states, attempts to suppress the right to vote of Black and brown people, including SB 202 in Georgia, which famously became law a month or so ago.
If D.C. attains statehood as you're advocating, must Puerto Rico necessarily follow?
Puerto Rico is a completely separate question, and it's something that many of the members of Congress of Puerto Rican descent are engaging in a very increasingly high-profile debate over. I think if the people of Puerto Rico want statehood, then they should become a state.
What of the solution that some have proposed, recognizing that Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton doesn't get to vote and there is no Senate representation, as you've reminded us? Why not take a portion of what currently comprises the district, give a portion of it to Maryland and a portion of it to Virginia, allowing for a more narrow district to remain as prescribed by the Constitution, so that the folks who live in the district today do have Senate representation and a voting member of Congress?
Do you mean why apply a double standard to the 700,000 plus people in Washington, D.C., most of whom are people of color? I mean, because that is the question, frankly. In Wyoming and in Vermont, for example, as I mentioned earlier, there is actually a smaller population than what is in Washington, D.C., and yet those states have 2 senators, as well as congressional representation. Let's stop making exceptions for people of color in a way that has adverse implications for them. Let's enfranchise people by making...
But respectfully, the exception wouldn't be made in the case of Wyoming, because, what was it, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution didn't say anything about Wyoming. It said we're going to create a district for the administration of government. You get the final word.
Yeah, respectfully, I think your response is not something that addresses the issue of those 2 states having more representation, which is to say really any representation, because Delegate Holmes Norton can't even vote on legislation, unfortunately. And the difference between those 2 states, aside from the fact that they have fewer people than in Washington, D.C., is that they are overwhelmingly white states. This is an issue of racial justice, in addition to being an issue of democracy. And we must stop disenfranchising people of color in this country. It's time to stop doing that.